Okay, chicos. So, what we're going to cover today is adjectives in Spanish and the verb tener, mostly how they're used to describe people, because that's what we're working on today. I normally like this lesson to be a lot more of a conversation and less of a lecture, but I cannot be there to have this conversation with you today, so we're going to go with plan B. So, first, the notes that you guys are going to need to fill out on this sheet. You can fill them out on paper if you have a hard copy, or you can fill them out digitally if you're working on a computer. But basically, we have los adjetivos, and here I just have an example description because we're going to use this as examples of the uses of adjectives and tener. So, where do adjectives go in relation to the noun they describe is my first question. Well, if we look at the examples, we have es una niña baja. It's a short girl. Niña, girl. Short, the adjective describing her is going after the noun. Let's see if that holds up for other examples. Tiene los ojos marrones. Marrones, brown, is the adjective that's describing her eyes, ojos. So we can say that adjectives go after the noun they describe. I have a note here that says that there are a couple of exceptions, like bueno, malo, grande, some adjectives of quantity. Those can come before, but don't stress about that too much because 99% of the time, the adjective will come after the noun it describes. Okay, how do adjectives change depending on the noun they describe? So, we have a couple different forms of adjectives to look at here. Es una niña baja, morena, y joven. So here we're describing somebody feminine, una niña, so I used feminine adjectives. Then, in the next sentence, I have tiene los ojos marrones y el pelo castaño, corto y liso. So I changed the form of my adjectives because here I'm talking about something masculine, el pelo, hair. And I also had to make an adjective plural because I was talking about something plural, her eyes, los ojos. So adjectives change for masculine or feminine, and they also change for singular or plural. That means if I'm talking about a masculine thing, I need to use a masculine adjective, like here. If I'm talking about a feminine thing, I need to make my adjective feminine. Singular and plural, it's the same. I have to change it depending on who or what I'm describing. Now, what are the forms for the different types of adjectives? There are a couple of different ones depending on what letter that adjective normally ends in. So if it's an adjective that ends in O, for example, bajo, in its masculine form, there are 4 different forms. So, for example, we would have bajo if I'm describing one masculine thing, a singular masculine thing. Baja if I'm describing a singular feminine thing. Bajos if I'm describing multiple masculine things, like a bunch of short boys. Or bajas if I'm talking about feminine plural things, more than one feminine thing. So, 4 different forms that adjective could take, ending in O, A, OS, or AS. If the adjective ends in an E, it's a little more simple. All that I have to do is change it for singular or plural. So, grande, for example, that's an adjective that ends in an E. If I'm talking about one thing, doesn't matter if it's masculine or feminine, grande. If I'm talking about 2 things, grandes. Doesn't matter if it's masculine or feminine, there's only 2 different forms. Same thing for adjectives that end in a consonant. So, for example, up here, joven means young, was used to describe one girl. But marrón, brown, whenever I was describing her eyes, multiple things, I had to make my adjective plural. So there's only 2 forms. It's going to end in the consonant that it ends in or in an ES. So we can use as our example joven. If I'm describing one person, either a boy or a girl, or jóvenes if I'm describing multiple young people. Okay. Last one I just gave you already. If it's an adjective that ends in or, on, an, or in, there are 4 different forms. So, for example, hablador means talkative. If I'm talking about a boy, I'll use that one. If I'm talking about a girl, habladora, habladores. If I'm talking about multiple boys or a mixed group of boys and girls, because if you guys remember, masculine always dominates in Spanish. So if there's a group of mixed gender, you use the masculine form. If it's a group of all girls, habladoras, like all the girls are talkative. Okay, the example that I used up here was exploradora. In case you were not sure who this was after reading that description, it was Dora. Okay, the other thing that we need to talk about based on this description and the other piece of descriptions that we're adding today is this verb, tener. Should also be a review for you guys. So, tener means to have. We've already been seeing this verb in the special persons interviews, like when I ask people how many siblings they have, or if they have pets, or even how old they are. But obviously, you can also use tener to describe anything that people have or own, so it's pretty important. Just to refresh you guys on the conjugations. Maybe you remember them, maybe you don't. Yo tengo, tú tienes. These are the forms that we've been seeing in our special person interviews. This one as well, whenever you guys were taking your notes. Tiene. Nosotros. Tenemos. Vosotros. Tenéis. Ellos, ellas, ustedes. Tienen. There you have it, your conjugations for tener. Now, for descriptions of people, we use tener for a couple of different things. One, we already talked about it, is age. So rather than saying, I am 15 years old, you say, for example, tengo 15 años. You don't have to necessarily put that example, I'm just giving it to you because it is not here in the description. Here we have some other examples. So, tiene los ojos marrones y el pelo castaño corto y liso. She has brown eyes and hair that is short, brown, and straight. Tiene una cabeza muy grande y redonda y tiene una nariz pequeña. She has a very big round head and she has a small nose. So, the other thing that we use tener for with descriptions is body parts, such as hair, eyes, and other physical features. This makes sense if you think about it, because we do this in English too. We say, I have brown hair, or I have blue eyes. So in Spanish, they say the same. You guys can see more examples of adjectives used with tener on this other note sheet that I provided for you. So this you don't have to take any notes on. It's just to give you guys kind of like a mini dictionary of some common adjectives that you can use to help you. It tells you if you should use ser, estar, or down here, the descriptions with tener. So tener with ojos, tiene los ojos oscuros. She has dark eyes. Tiene el pelo largo. She has long hair. Describing nose and then some other physical features. Okay. Hopefully at this point your notes are complete. Now we have to do a little bit of practice. And the practice that we are going to do is describing this señor. Okay. Se llama Pau Gasol y es un jugador de baloncesto para los Lakers. So, Primero vamos a hacer la descripción física, cómo es físicamente. Vamos a empezar con su pelo, his hair, su pelo. ¿Cómo es el pelo de Pau Gasol? Tiene el pelo un poco largo, castaño y rizado. Los ojos. Bueno, tiene los ojos marrones. Otras partes del cuerpo. Bueno, tiene una nariz un poco grande y tiene los brazos, sus arms, sus brazos, muy largos. So, in case you guys missed it, I used the verb tener to describe all three of these because I used tener to describe physical attributes when they're a part of the body. Ahora su estatura, his stature, his height. I'm going to use a different verb to describe. I'm going to say es alto. Es muy, muy, muy alto. Okay? Use ser as a description or a characteristic here when I'm describing his height. Okay, a couple of other things. Lugar, posición y acción progresiva. Primero, ¿dónde está? ¿Dónde está? Bueno, ¿está en el estadio o está en la corte? ¿En qué posición está? What position is he in? ¿Está de pie? He's standing. ¿Está cerca de Kobe? He's close to Kobe. ¿Qué está haciendo? And if you guys remember, this is the part that I said you don't necessarily have to know how to do for now, although I've already seen some of you doing it in the assignments you've turned in. For now, if you don't want to use estar, you can just use a present tense verb. So you could say, está jugando baloncesto, or basketball if you prefer. Or if you don't want to use that fancy form with estar, you could also just say, juega baloncesto, or basketball. So for all of these, I used estar because I was talking about his location, his position, and a progressive action. Okay, su importancia, importance, en la historia o la actualidad currently in the United States. Origen o la origen de su familia. Bueno, es de España. Maybe you knew that, maybe you didn't, but he is from Spain. I'm talking about his origin, so I'll use ser. Su ocupación. Bueno, es un jugador de baloncesto o es basquetbolista. He is a basketball player. Again, I'm using ser because I'm describing his ocupación. Maybe you know more details about his basketball career that you could also express using ser, like what team he plays for or played for. I don't believe he's still with the Lakers. Relaciones importantes. So, relationships that might be significant in his life. Just based on the photo, I could say, es el amigo de Kobe. If you know more about his personal life because you're a basketball fan and you know about this guy, cool. You could also talk about his wife, his other player friends, whatever. In any case, you would use ser because you're talking about a relationship. And then lastly, eventos, events, cumplidos, which are accomplishments importantes en su vida. You could use a variety of verbs to talk about this. I'm going to say, es un NBA All-Star 4 veces. He is a 4-time All-Star. In that case, I'm kind of talking about an event time So I would use ser. But there are lots of different things that you could say whenever you're talking about someone's accomplishments. Okay, lastly, la personalidad is personality. And this is where maybe if it's a person you're not as familiar with, you have to invent a little bit or base it on what you think about the person based on the data that you have. So I can even use my note sheet in order to help me with this. I'm gonna say es trabajador. He's an NBA player. They usually have to be pretty hardworking in order to play at that level and practice a lot. Es impaciente, probablemente, based on things I've read about him. Maybe not the most patient person. Y también es simpático. Es simpático. He seems like a pretty nice guy. In all of these cases, I'm using ser because I'm talking about characteristics, características. So, that was a little walkthrough on using ser, estar, and tener and answering some basic questions about people in order to give a description. Now that we've done an example, hopefully you have a better idea, and pretty soon we'll be putting it into practice with you guys describing some people on your own with my help. Gracias, chicos. Hopefully see you soon.